It's cooked. Seele was the first limited DPS that came out in Honkai Star Rail, and by default she was the best back then. But now, how is she doing? Well, that's what I want to talk about. My experience is based around having E2S1 Seele paired with E0 S0 supports. I've played Star Rail since release, and I basically get myself an E2S1 Seele back then in under 160 pulls, and she carried me for a long time. I use her a lot in my playthrough, and as anyone would have guessed, she made the early game quite a lot easier. It also helped that back then there was a high amount of quantum weak enemies, especially in key fights, like the Bellabog lieutenant guy who had a crush on Servo, and then there was also Cocolia. So the content was made in a way where Seele would feel very dominant to use. And this was even true for MOC back then, where there are actual enemies weak to quantum, and not just on 4-7. Then they started releasing new DPS and slowly made the content be tailored against her instead. There are enemies not having quantum weakness, to even having quantum res, and then there are enemies who doesn't count as actually dying when you kill them, so you can't trigger resurgence of them. There's also things like, if you buff Seele with this buff and Seele kills, it doesn't count as Seele getting the kill, so you don't trigger resurgence, which is like, why? It's so annoying. But not only that, with every new DPS that came out, they tailored the content for them instead, making Seele feel a lot worse to use. And that's where the key is. Seele is known as one of the washed up DPS because she's quite literally the first limited DPS that came out. But even the old DPS after her, they've also started to feel like they're in decline. Jing Yuan, Blade, Imbibitor Lune, Jing Liu, Dr. Ratio. They've all had their share of meta relevance. They all had their moments where it feels like the content was good for them, but then they also feel unimpressive to use, especially without proper vertical investment. Even for the ones on top back then, the queen of meta Jing Liu, her top spot was borderline taken when Acheron came out, and people started to say that Jing Liu is washed instead. Nowadays, dare I say, even people called Acheron washed, because the content no longer caters to her, so she also felt worse to use. And the funny thing is, there are people who denies this fact, saying things like Acheron will never be power crept, despite seeing DPS getting the treatment over and over again. I think Acheron is just facing what Seele and the other oldies have been experiencing, and that if you still want to use her, you have to properly vertical invest in her and her team. For Acheron, it's getting her Sig, her Eidolon 2, and getting Jiaoqiu and maybe his signature as well. For Seele, you want her Sig, yes, but you don't actually want her Eidolons. You're much better off getting her support Eidolons instead on top of their signatures, because they have an even bigger impact to her damage output. So as of making this video, that'll be an E1 S1 Robin and E2 S1 Sparkle. Then you finish it off with either a Huo Huo and maybe her Eidolon 1, or a third support like E1 S1 Ran Mei, or maybe an E0 S1 Jiaoqiu. I heard that he's actually not that bad with Seele. And no, Silver Wolf is not one of her best support options outside of Apocalyptic Shadow, where you need to actually brute force a quantum weaken or else the boss at 50 billion damage res before being weakness broke. I think this has been more so of a talk on how other DPSs are going through what Seele has gone through for a long time now. Back then, everyone said that if Jing Liu is power crept, then everyone else is. And today, people are saying if Acheron is power crept, then everyone else is. Well duh, that's how it goes. Nowadays, the big boys of the DPSs is like Fei Xiao, Yun Li, and Boot Hill. And even for these three, they are not safe from power creep. But at the same time, if you want to use them for the long term, you can consider proper vertical investment in their teams, which is the next video that I'm going to be working on, with horizontal versus vertical investment in Honkai Star Rail. And just to give a quick thought, I do think that vertical investment is highly underrated, especially for free-to-plays / low spenders. But that's gonna be that video. If you guys like the video, please give it a like, Comment down what your thoughts are, feedbacks are very appreciated. I'll be reading through them. If you want to see more of me, consider hitting the subscribe button, it's free. I plan on doing more of these Yap videos in the future, and even for other games. Now take a sip of water and have a good day.